Hello, and sorry I'm not here, but we can still take notes. Today we're going to learn about observational studies versus experiments. We'll learn a little bit of the language of experiments, and I'll give you some points on how to experiment badly so we can hopefully avoid experimenting badly. So we need to start by distinguishing the differences between observational studies and experiments. We've actually already looked at some observational studies. Sample surveys are a type of observational study. The key with observational studies is an observational study observes individuals and measures variables of interest, but does not attempt to influence the responses. In contrast, an experiment deliberately imposes some treatment on individuals to measure their responses. So here's the key. Observational study does not attempt to influence. You simply observe. And an experiment deliberately imposes something on the individuals to try to change them. One key here, individuals is not necessarily like people. It could be anything. Like in our first example here, the individuals is actually laptop computers. So it says, does reducing screen brightness increase battery life in laptop computers? To find out, researchers obtained 30 new laptops of the same brand. They chose 15 computers at random and adjusted their screen brightness to the brightest setting. The other 15 laptops were left at the default setting of moderate brightness. Researchers then measured how long each machine's battery lasted. So was this an observational study or an experiment? This is absolutely an experiment. It's an experiment because a treatment, in this case, brightness of the screen, was imposed on the laptops. The next thing we need to talk about is lurking variables and confounding. So if we think of this laptop example, basically it sounds like they started with 30 laptops. And they randomly assigned they randomly assigned 15 to a treatment group. We'll call it treatment 1. And let's see. They chose 15 computers and adjusted the screens to the brightest setting. So treatment 1 was the brightest setting. And the second treatment, treatment 2, was just the default setting. Now, it might be weird calling this second group a treatment because we didn't really treat anything. Lots of times people will just call this the control, and that's fine too. Now, let's say in order to do this, setting 15 of them to the brightest setting and 15 of them to the default setting, they had an intern carry these 15 laptops I don't know, outside, and let's say it was a super hot day. Let's say it was 110 degrees outside. And the professor handled the default group, so he didn't have to do anything, and he did this inside, and it was nice and air conditioning. Now, there could be a problem here. While we expect the brightness to decrease the battery life, we don't really know what effect the temperature, the exterior temperature, has on battery life. I think, and I'm not sure, you'd have to ask someone with an electrical engineering background, but I believe battery life is depleted in higher temperatures for laptops. Mainly, or maybe because the laptop has to cool itself and power fans and other things at a much higher rate than it would on the inside. So, in this case, we have something happening. We have what's called a lurking variable. Lurking variable. And what the lurking variable is doing is it's causing confounding. Now, the idea of this experiment was to figure out if a explanatory variable, screen brightness, had an effect on a response variable, battery life. Let me actually write that here. Let me see here. We're going to do it right there too. So in this case, the explanatory variable was brightness. The response variable was battery life. And these are the only two variables the researchers intended to study. However, this lurking variable has emerged. Temperature. Here's why lurking variables are bad. In an experiment, we want to draw connections between the explanatory variable and the response variable. So we want to determine that brightness is in fact causing battery life to decrease. However, with temperature thrown in there, we're not really sure if it's the brightness, the temperature, or a combination of both that's causing the battery life to decrease. This not really sure which of these is causing this to change is called confounding. Confounding is kind of like the word confusing. We're not really sure which of these is causing it. Here's something. Lurking variables will always exist in any experiment. But in well-designed experiment, we can make sure our lurking variables do not become confounding variables, or we can at least limit how confounding they happen. Lurking variables cause problems in two ways. They create extra variability in the response variable, And they also have the potential to become confounding and make it confusing to determine if it's our explanatory variable or some lurking variable that's causing differences in the response variable. So I recommend you go to the book when you're done with this video. On page 232, you can write out the definitions for both lurking variables and confounding. Let's look at this next example. Does eating dinner with their families improve students' academic performance? According to an ABC News article, teenagers who eat with their families at least 5 times a week are more likely to get better grades in school. The findings were based on a sample survey conducted by researchers at Columbia University. So it's a prestigious university. Was this an observational study or an experiment? This was an observational study. We know this for 2 reasons. For one, it says the findings were based on a sample survey. And I started this video saying sample surveys were observational studies, or a type of observational studies. But the other thing we notice is no treatment was imposed on the students. So we could say students were not assigned to a particular number of meals to eat with their families. So that makes it an observational study. We did not assign the individuals to their treatment. In this case, what are the explanatory and the response variables? Now, even though it's an observational study, we still have explanatory and response variables. So the explanatory variable is the number, or I guess you could say frequency, the number of meals per week eaten with their family. And the response variable what's the response variable in here? More likely to get better grades in school. So grades in school, so probably their GPA. That would be a good response variable measuring grades in school. Now, ABC, the news article, said teenagers who eat with their families are more likely to get better grades in school. Would it be fair to say then that eating with your family causes an increase in academic performance? In other words, can we assign a cause and effect relationship between the number of meals per week eaten with their family and GPA? And the answer, of course, is no. This is an observational study, and there could be lurking variables. For instance, so let's answer this question. Explain clearly. No. This is an observational study. Thus, cause and effect relationships cannot be established. The reason they can't is because there might be lurking variables. And a lurking variable would be influencing this response variable. So, I don't know, families that eat together may also be families that have parents who are interested in their kids' academic performance. So, that could be a lurking variable. Yeah. Or maybe something else. Maybe families that eat together have kids who have time to eat with their families, and those are students with less difficult courses that are easier to get better grades in. We don't really know, and that's the whole point. There are lots of lurking variables that could be confounding with our explanatory variable, making it difficult to determine what is causing certain students to have higher GPAs than others. All right. So write an example of a lurking variable there in a moment. Let's look at the back. Here's some important terms from the language of experiments. First, the experimental units. These are the smallest collection of individuals in which treatments are applied. And lots of times students get this confused. They think it has to be people or it has to be animals. It could be all sorts of things. Just find the smallest collection of individuals in which the treatment's applied. I mean, that's really the best way to say it. If you could go ahead and define these from the book, you'll be in good shape. And then finally, if you could do example 3 here, which is question 1 from the 2010 AP Statistics exam, fill this out and then check your answer online. You should be able to pull up the answers for this. So if you have all of that complete by tomorrow, the definitions and the few little notes I didn't write down, we'll be good to go. And then you can go ahead and start your homework for today. Okay, have a nice day. Bye.